Awesome. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm really excited that Tristan is here this week to tell us about Castor. So I'm just going to hand it on over to him.
Yes, okay, great. Thank you very much. I must admit, it's kind of the first time I do a kind of a webinar like this, so hopefully it will go well. But as a short introduction, so as you can hear, I'm French. I'm a data scientist. I've been working in a New York startup for a year, and I came back to France to finish my studies. I'm studying in engineering school, a master degree in data science. And through my experience in New York, as well as the project I've done this year with multiple consulting firm and consulting companies data projects, I've just noticed that each time I start a data project, I just get a new CSV or I have access to a new data warehouse. It's just a kind of nightmare to understand the data, know what columns is referring to, if a table has been filtered out on whichever dimension, if it's euros or dollars, if it's second or minutes. And usually there's like nothing to do, no good practice, no tools, no documentation or whatever. And so I was finding that weird, and I'm still quite junior, so I had no idea about how it went in the real world, in the real data science team. So I started with one friend to interview people in France, knowing about how companies were dealing with this problem, like if there was any kind of tools or documentation regarding data. So we interviewed 200 people in France, data analysts, scientists, engineers, data managers, product manager, and basically everyone had encountered the kind of same situation. They kind of know, typically they just encounter this problem as well, and there was not like no one was really sure about how they deal with it, and usually everyone ended up just asking the managers or the last data analyst who's done the work on this table. So we had a look at the different solution, and like for the huge banks and insurance company, they had to know what data they were looking at, what data they were collecting, and like who was using it. So there are like huge actors that have addressed their specific use case and their specific needs, providing them with huge thing to map all the data and have a documentation and a clear thing that can be provided to compliance guards and entities. And then we looked at what the top tech companies have done, and basically Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Spotify, LinkedIn, they all developed a tool internally to address this issue. Sometimes it's called data catalog, sometimes it's data discovery, sometimes it's data documentation. Documentation is not really sexy, like no one wants to do documentation, so we tend to say more data discovery tool, but basically it's also about documenting. But basically all those top tech companies mastering their data, they've all built something internally. And we had a look at what they've done. Basically, it's very similar from one company to another. It's a search bar where you can look for any kind of data within your company, whether it's a table, whether it's a column, whether it's sometimes even a dashboard or an analysis that has been done on a Power BI or Tableau or Looker. And it's really easy, really collaborative. Everyone can comment, can add some documentation. You can see the statistic. What was the last plot that has been done on this table? And those tools, well, we would have loved to use them during either our internship or our project. And it was too bad because like there wasn't really any solution for us to use this kind of tool. And nowadays we're seeing more and more companies using the data in similar ways to what those huge tech companies are doing. So either for recommender system or just BI, simple BI, you still need those tools, and you don't have access to that. And that's how we started Castor. So it was 4 months ago now. So we were 2 data scientists and 1 software engineer from NYU who we've met, who was doing an exchange with our universities in France. And we've been just trying to look and replicate those tools, but for everyone. The idea is to make something really, really simple, really easy to implement, because the last thing you want is that documentation takes you time. Although it's valuable and we, like in the long run, you see the value of it. At first sight, it's hard to determine what is the ROI on it, and you don't want to invest in those kind of tools. So we want something really simple, really easy. That's why also we sell it and present it as a data discovery tool. But yeah, maybe I can jump on the demo, or if you have first opinion on that. But the idea really is to make something as easy as possible, really lightweight, like really different to those. Like for example, there's a really famous tool that is called Colibra, in which Google has invested. They are addressing those huge banks and insurance companies. It costs 50,000 to make a POC with them, and then it's like millions of dollars per year. We don't address the same market. We address smaller startups, smaller companies, more agile, with new technologies. We think that the new kind of new combo in the tech ecosystem is dbt plus Snowflake. Everyone is starting to use it, so we've integrated with those tools, and then and then the idea is to make dbt, Snowflake, dbt, and then Castor, and I'm going to show you how it looks like. So I'm going to try and share my screen. You're going to show, you're going to tell me if it works. Can you all see my screen? So I just need to whoop. Okay, so the idea is really simple. We're on a SaaS system, and here's how it looks like. So a very simple login, just for obviously security reasons. Whoops, I need to log in with true line doing some stuff there. For security reasons and to monitor activities on our website as well. I hope I got the right password. Yeah, and so this is the first page. We've taken Tesla as a fake company, obviously, for the demo, but the idea is to arrive on something really easy, a Google-like page on which you can look for anything. So as I told you, if you want to look for customers in your data, you have all the columns in red and all the tables in green who are referencing customer either in their name. So this is the column name, this is a table name, but sometimes you have, like, for example, payment sequential, which is in Snowflake, Demo database, e-commerce Demo schema, and this will reference customer in the description. So it's a bit more powerful than just looking for a word on the name. And then we've designed this page, which is kind of the Wikipedia-like page of any data set. So you get the name of the data set, where it comes from, so Snowflake e-commerce demo. You get a small description there. So this is for the granularity of the table. So what each row is referring to, what this data set is about, maybe a short word about where it comes from and why it has been produced. And this is editable, so you can just add, it's a text area, you can write whatever you want. Then we've added the owner or the responsible for the data set. This is editable as well. The idea is to just refer to someone that is knowledgeable, that can have some access to this data set if there is any question, with the creation date. We're going to add the last update as well. This is a feature that is coming this week, but the idea is to have as much information and context as possible on the table itself. So the creation, the last update. We got the frequent users. So we've tried to parse the queries that have been done on Snowflake, for example, or who has done the queries. Sometimes it's not working. So this is a mix of who is actually using the table through queries, but also when, like, people who are often looking at the documentation will appear in those frequent users. So it might be data analyst, more knowledgeable people on the data set who have done more analysis than the owner itself, and who might be interesting to reach out if you're doing the same analysis. Then the completion level is about the level of documentation. So for example, if I erase this description, this will go down. And the idea is that it empowers the search. So when you look for something, the first results in the ranking will be data sets that are well documented, so that it incentivizes people to document well their table and their data, and that it's more relevant when you're looking for a data set. Data quality here, this is for now, because we've been working on this for 4 months, so it's still like the first version of it, but it's a very manual process. The idea is just to differentiate between core tables of the company. So for example, here we're looking at the customer data set, and the data set is about all the list of customers within the company. So this might be like a core data set. You want to put the data quality at 100%. You want to say that this table is really reliable, and we want to differentiate those core tables to the more temporary one that data analyst might create. So if a data analyst is doing his analysis on the side, doing some draft and creating some tables for himself, you might want to put the data quality cursor to 0 so that it won't appear in the search. And again, yeah. So this and that's people will not rely as much on it as one core data set. So it's just a score. We want to integrate with other tools. We are quite close to Toro data as well, and some other tools. Sometimes there even is some internal algorithm to establish a data quality score. So we can connect and just have the score printed out here. The idea that everything is related to what's important for the company. And then we get some GDPR or compliance information, whether there is some personal information in the dataset and the retention policy. And the last thing on the left here is adding tags. So marketing, you can add finance, you can add the custom tags. The idea is then to be able to filter in the search on different things you want to look at and like have some analytics about what tables are used on different tags. And on the right-hand side here is just the list of the columns with, again, a small description for each of them. It's a text area that can be editable, the type of the column, and some stars. The idea is that sometimes you might have tables with 50 columns, and 15 of them have been used just to join tables together. And the most interesting columns are two columns in the table. So you're just going to star the two first one, and they're going to come up at first on the screen. So it's just a UI thing. And then you can check all the modifications that has been done on the documentation, on the history thing. So everyone is, so the person that has modified the documentation, when it has been modified, this is just so you can edit and go back if needed. And it will also appear if, for example, the customer dataset has a new column, it will appear in this history as well. And the final part on this side is the lineage part. So this is a huge subject. It relates more to the data engineering part, and it's really valuable for data engineers, maybe less for data analysts, even though it's like still very important. For now, it's really, really manual. We're looking into integration of dbt and other tools, so we can have something really automatic. But for now, the idea is just to be able to copy and paste either the query that has been used to create the table, either a link to either a GitHub or GitLab or a file that is the ETL query that produces this data set. We don't, yeah, for now it's just really manual. And here is to see the links between the different tables. So for example, the tables that have been used to create customer data sets, you're gonna just manually add them and see visualize which are the parents table. And here is about the table that are created from this one, so the kind of child. It's still really manual. We are trying some things to pass the DDLs or to find some ways to have this nice graph automatically. Lineage and ETLs is not yet standardized over all companies, so it's really difficult to make something scalable, but for now this is what we have. And the final feature that we've developed is just the ability to look for tables and to navigate through the databases, the schemas really easily through folders, and might be able to have the list of tables within these schemas, for example, with the description and not only through the search. So yeah, this is about it regarding the implementation part and how we approach our client or customers. The idea is that, again, it's really, really simple. We only touch and have access to the metadata. So it's only regarding the schemas of the data warehouse. We only get the table name and the description name and some other information, but at no point in time we have access to the data itself. So this is really important, obviously, for compliance and security reasons. And we've developed connector with the most famous data warehouses in the cloud. So we are able to put in place this tool really quickly and easily. Again, documentation is not sexy, it's not something you want to lose time on. So the idea is to make it really friendly, easy. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to have some thoughts and what you think about it. And like how, if you ever had the idea of something of such a tool, and yeah, knowing about your experience as well on those issues. I think I can come back. Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. That's awesome. I especially like the documentation complete metrics, right? Because that's something that you don't always get insight into, right? You have some amount of it's documented, and hopefully your team's following the procedures, but actually to have something that tells you, yeah, this is where we're at in that, I think it's really cool. Um, could you show? Let's see. What do I want to say? Okay, where are descriptions stored? So you have like the column descriptions as well as the table descriptions. Are those stored in your own meta database? Is that stored on the Castor backend, or is it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For
Mm,
now, everything is stored on our side. Again, we are quite young. We're looking at ways to do some on-premise version of it. I guess for now, it's not our priority, because if we want to develop a more complete version, I guess there's a lot of stuff we can add. Like for example, some statistic. If we have access to the data itself, we can add some statistic on the columns and stuff. For now,
mm,
everything is stored on our own servers.
yeah, because
Yeah.
there was one when on a team I worked on, we did a really like we worked through having all of the columns documented within the database because you can add columns to tables and columns. And so when we looked at some documentation tools, when we looked at Looker, and Looker had the ability to pull in, or like they didn't have the ability, they had the ability to document fields, but I'm wondering about this like import capability. If somebody already has documentation on
Yeah.
the database, is there a way to pull it into Castor?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a really good point. I know on some data warehouses, you can also have comments in the metadata. And when you scrap it, we have access to those comments. The thing is that when you're growing and Looker has the same, also you can document in Looker. Our guess is that we need to have one source of truth in the company, and if you have it on Looker, maybe someone who's a data engineer and need the documentation doesn't have access to Looker because it's too expensive or whatever, and then needs another way to find the documentation. The idea is that we are also developing connectors to those BI tools, because we want to integrate before to the data warehouses and after to the data tools. So we are
Mhm.
about to ship the Tableau connectors, so we can reference not only the columns and tables, but also the dashboards and views and tableaus. But
Mhm.
yeah, the idea is to connect to all the ecosystem, but have one source of truth that everyone can access, that everyone can see and edit, so that it's not painful and it's not hard to look in. I know the Looker and the Metabase documentation is like hardly discoverable, and then it doesn't encourage you to document and add some description. We want to be able to push our documentation in those tools. We know it's feasible to do it the other way around. So if there is some documentation already in Looker, we can export it to Castor, and we are looking into ways to do the other way around and push our documentation in Looker or in other tools. But for now, it's still basic. But again, yeah, we think that there needs to be a tool that references the source of truth for the data in a company. And if you have data scientists working on a Jupyter notebook and a data analyst working on Looker, they need to have the same information, knowledge about the data, and maybe not using the same tool. They won't have access to the same documentation. So that's maybe one answer to your question. I hope it
Mhm.
is
Yeah, I
clear.
think that alignment is the most valuable thing that a standalone tool could provide, because like we have a pretty standard DBT Looker stack, and there's some documentation in DBT, there's some documentation in Looker, some fields only exist in Looker and they aren't actually in the table, they're calculated, within the visualization layer. It just gets so complicated to keep everything in sync, and then to ultimately have one place where everyone can access it, and where changes are bidirectional. Because some people have developer access in Looker, some people are DBT developers, some people are just consumers but know enough about it that they could absolutely contribute to documentation, but they don't have any development rights. And I think if there were a way to organize all of those things and have information flow wherever it's needed, that would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, we've talked to the people who developed the tool internally in Lyft and in Uber, and this is exactly what they were talking about. Is that we don't want to be like another data tool, because obviously there's like a lot of them, and when you have a data stack with 15 data tool, you don't want to document everywhere, and the idea that it can flows into all those tools and be connected to everything. And the way it was used in those companies is that usually when you're data people, because this is how they define it, it's either a data engineer, either a data scientist or data analyst. You have on one side the data dictionary, so Castor or whatever, and on the other side you have your tool on which you're doing your analysis, whether it's a Jupyter notebook, whether it's a SQL querying tool, whether it's a Looker dashboard, and you can just go back and forth on those tools and have the documentation on one part and the other tool on the other part. But yeah, again, the more connected it will be, the more valuable and more powerful it will be, for sure.
So how do you think about the target audience for actually coming into the tool? Is that primarily people who would be, is there like a technical bar? Like if you can't write a SQL query, there's no reason that you would need this level of documentation. Kind of that documentation should live in a visualization tool if that's all you're doing. Or how do you kind of think about who would actually be using this?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point as well. For now, and for the first version of our product, we are really designed for data, let's say, scientists and analysts. So for the data team, the idea is that you're using data on a daily basis. But our long-term vision, and this is like what we are aiming with developing Tableaus and Looker connectors, is that whenever you have a question about data, if you're a product manager, you can have access to Castor and dive into what analysis has been done. And this is what happened at Lyft. This is what happened at Airbnb, is that this tool becomes data democratization tools. And then when you're doing an analysis, you can have some review and you can have some exposure thanks to Castor and thanks to people going through Castor to look for information and to look for analysis. So the idea in the long run that everyone should be able to use Castor. We've designed it so that it's really simple, easy, low-code version. The lineage part is more technical. The catalog part is more for data analysts. So we're trying to address all these people, but in the long run, we would like to have like product manager, salespeople. Each time someone is using a dashboard or looking at the KPI and needs to have some more context about it, he will look into Castor, and that's the long-term vision. For now, obviously, the first features are really designed for data people, but in the long run, and this is what we've seen in the huge tech companies. In Lyft, 25% of the product manager are using the Amundsen, which is the equivalent data catalog tool on a weekly basis. So this is kind of where we aim. And I guess it will go through referencing not only the tables and the columns, but also the analysis, the dashboards, the views, and everything around data.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. For bonus points, it would also be amazing to make developers a stakeholder in this. Like if there were a way for me to require documentation when a new column appears in our database, that would be so delightful.
Yeah, absolutely. In Uber, the feature that works the best was like a small upvote button. And then when there was like 5 upvotes, the creator or the guy responsible for the table has to document it. Was sent a notification and had to document it. And that was something that worked really well. And all of these small UI features, we're working on it. And I guess, yeah, this is how it will be powerful and how you will just encourage and incentivize people to document. I totally agree with you.
I have a question. First of all, like, thanks for the presentation. I especially like this data quality like measure. Like, we are having a lot of problems with that. Like, every data analyst is creating a table, and it's almost impossible to find which one is like the real tables and which one is just like ad hoc query type of thing. I was looking at your website. I saw that there's also a discussion part, which doesn't exist in the demo. I think it's very interesting. Can you tell more about the plans on that, like the social aspect of this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, and that's the feature we are developing this week. So hopefully it will be out next week. We are trying to integrate a Rocket chat to it, and the idea would be to each data set have a discussion part related to it. So the idea is that if you don't find the documentation you need on this part, you also have a discussion part when you can tag people, when you can have links to other tables, and when you can have well, it's just about not losing any knowledge. When you do it on Slack, you will lose it and you have nowhere, you can't access it afterwards and you will lose it. If you do it on our, like next to where the documentation is, then you will have access to the previous messages. Like for sure, someone would have asked the same question like 2 days ago and you will have the answer directly. And yeah, this is like the next feature that's gonna happen. We are trying that the best way to implement it and to relate each tables so that you can, similarly to when you have a Slack channel, you can tag other people, you can tag other channels. The idea would be to tag other data sets, other columns within data sets. And yeah, absolutely. I guess this will also be part of the collaborativeness and the just users engaging with the product is to have this discussion tab. Yeah, it would this is something we're working hard on for the last few days.
Sounds cool. One more question. Is it possible to like search tables by like user or something like that? Like sometimes, for example, like there's a group in our company like doing forecasting, and like I just want to like check what are the tables that they are using just to have an understanding of like the key tables for them. So I would like to like filter tables by like, I don't know, with a couple of users, like the most frequently used ones or something like that. Is possible? I guess there's no usage information here, but
there's not yet this possibility. This is really interesting, and there's something we're going to integrate to a roadmap. We've added this tag version. So again, maybe if you have for now the user feedback we had is they were waiting for something about teams. So exactly what you said. If there's a forecasting team, you might want to add a tag forecasting, and then you can filter out on only those tables. I'm not sure it's integrated to our search bar yet, but this is definitely something we've looked at and want to implement as well. Is having this tag and team thing, and in the long run, we would also want to do similarly to what Airbnb is doing. Have like user accounts where you can see what are the different tables someone has been using, what are the different analysis he's been following. We want to add something also about if you are having your own frequently used tables, so you can directly access them. Also having like if there's a change on the documentation on a table that you are following, having a notification. We want to add some nice, a bit like a social media, but not that to that extent. But we want to add some more notification settings about modification, who are the one using it, and all this idea about collaborating around the documentation. I guess this is the most important, and especially in data where sometimes you have to work on business terms. For example, the most typical example is what is an active user. In most of the company, active user is not defined in the data team, is defined in either the marketing or the finance part, and no one has the same definition of what is an active user. And if you had one clear place when you know this is the source of truth of your company, and you can access the definition and maybe the query that is like the only source of truth for what is an active user, then like the finance guy should be able to write it in Castor and should be able to document what is an active user in Castor. So that's also about the question we were asked. I was asked just a few minutes earlier about why everyone should collaborate on documentation is because sometimes knowledge about data is not only in the data team. And similarly with other terms, but active users is quite symptomatic. We never know if it's someone that has done that has logged in the past 3 days, 3 months, 3 weeks. if he has done a payment or if he has just logged in. And I guess it's quite typical of many companies. What is an active user?
We had that problem at Atlassian. Yeah, the more product teams you have, the more complex I feel like this gets to.
Mm-hmm. One thing that comes up with that is often like you're going to have maybe a marketing definition and a sales and a product team definition for like active user. Maybe the executive team has their own idea. And the solution for this of getting like everybody in the room hash out like, okay, this is what this definition means, and then move on, right? Is there any sort of, have you thought about adding in any sort of approval process for definitions or metrics? Like where I could say, okay, this has been reviewed by head of marketing and our chief sales for the US or something like that.
Yes, so this is actually one of our thoughts right now is how we're going to deal with the access rights. So we get the login for now. Everyone can access and edit the documentation. Maybe this is not something that every company wants, and sometimes you only want some knowledgeable people to be able to edit and modify either a definition of a business term, either a definition of a column. For now, we've only included the history, so if anything is changed, you can still access the older version. But on the long run, I guess, yeah, we'll have some access right and editable right or view only rights. But again, this is not something that we prioritize. We believe like everyone should be able to add some knowledge if he has some, and yeah, we need to have some process to verify and check the modifications.
Yeah, and mine's not so much about access control as just like a stamp of approval sort of a thing,
yeah.
Right? Like marketing has I go in and edit all the definitions, and this is probably combined into this might be best combined into your chat discussion feature that you're talking about, where you're like, okay, this person, like marketing has approved this set of definitions and agrees, so that as somebody who's trying to go out and get consensus on data definitions, I might go to one team at another and be like, oh, hey, look, these guys have already bought into these definitions. You should change yours to match these, and then we'll all get on the same page. And those sorts of discussions, and having some tool, having the tool help with that like approval process to get buy-in from all the different groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I guess it will also be a mix of who's responsible for, if it's, for example, active users here, and we have the definition, because we want to integrate also a business glossary. So for example, active user, we will have some definition and then some queries, and then there will be someone responsible. So for example, the head of marketing, and maybe the mix of responsibility and data quality might be an answer to approval. I guess, yeah, this is some really important features we need to think about, and like the best way to integrate it, not to make it too complicated neither, because you don't want to have your head boiling because of documentation.
Yeah. Honestly, if you had a chat history of the discussion around the table and the data, it could probably easily just be somebody coming in and saying yes in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How are you planning to get users into the system? So the idea of being able to like mention anybody, maybe pull in like all of our Slack users or something like that. Do you have those sorts of integrations for authentication and getting like user lists into the tool?
No, that's a really good point. We haven't thought at all about that for now. For now, it's just a simple login on our platform. So we only need the employees to create an account on Castor, which is like a 2-step long process with the address of the company. But no, there's no onboarding, like automatic onboarding of employees from Slack, which could be actually something really, really interesting. But that's something that's a really good feedback. We haven't thought about it.
Yeah, because I know all sorts of just-in-time like provisioning, either through Okta or Active Directory or Slack, like being able to just log in and have it do some sort of OAuth process, right? And then, yeah.
Yes, for now.
Because I know if I'm like in the tool and I want to mention somebody, if they haven't logged into the tool yet, that would be problematic, right? Because I wouldn't be able to reference them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But that it should be a good way for us to onboard him as well. So we should have some process for that. And if you want to call your friend to go and have a look on Castor, obviously we should incentivize this.
Yeah, I guess the easiest way would be to just say like add an email address, and it'll send him an email with how to log in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's just basically that.
What do you have in an administration panel? What does like the administration view look like at this point?
For now, we don't have any. For now, it's really manual. So the onboarding process is just about creating a user account on your data warehouse with read-only access to your metadata, and we take care on our end of the rest. And then we have an automatic update of the data warehouse each week, and we are putting in place an option to like manually update the tables and the data schemas within Castor from Castor. We don't have designed and implemented yet the admin part.
Right. That does seem pretty critical though, right? Because that's how you're going to control connections to the database and how frequently
absolutely.
tables will update and things like that, which is very much like administration side versus everybody should edit documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have a question for you regarding this. What would you see as well on the documentation panel? So obviously the credentials and the way to connect to the data warehouses, but for example, would you have some statistic or analytics on the user and the users and who is using which tables? And I guess maybe this is where we might also enter into the admin, the access rights and this kind of stuff. What is the other critical features that an admin would require for this kind of tool?
Well, the database connections and setting up the users so that you can sync that is definitely like in the admin side. Seeing who I think there's a place probably for some statistics and just thinking about it, like the how complete documentation is there should probably be some sort of analytics page that is available to everyone that you could sort by how complete documentation is or something like that. And then that allows anybody to be able to go in and prioritize some work to update documentation or see, look for stale things, when was something last updated or something like that. And those sorts of analytics, and maybe even allow people to view like login statistics. These are the people who do the most searches. This is the most, just sort of tracking tool adoption, I think is a good thing, especially from an admin point of view, but some of those statistics might be useful just in general.
Absolutely. Our data scientists, so we are tracking everything on our end, but obviously this can be provided to the users. Obviously, we would be interested if we were able to use it. So this is
make sure you have some documentation around that.
Yeah, just to add to what Dylan mentioned, I think it would be kind of interesting if you can bucket this by and this is back to like setting up teams. What I noticed previously and with previous work is like our biggest worry was an analyst hacks together a table, but your end users who are like in your sales team should be using like the core table and they accidentally use something else. You might not need to parse queries to know that. Like if you just know that the sales team is actively checking documentation of this one table that is not at all like cleared, like even if data quality is like flagged as 0, but they're just like, yeah, this gets us our incentive numbers. And you're like, no, 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 this is like nowhere near correct. Might be like a quick flag to like have the central data team know what are like most viewed tables by which team, and then might be like an early warning. I think that's actually an easier solution than trying to parse query, because we tried building a tool like that where we could like take all the logs from our warehouse and see what queries are being run and try to trace back users and who is actively using it. Like it's a pain. It's a massive pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, our frequent users is a proxy with who is viewing the documentation frequently.
Gotcha.
And, yeah,
that makes
that's
sense.
what we
Oh, so
do.
that might already be baked in. Not the most important.
There's something in there to consider as well about the that sort of just-in-time provisioning, where you're pulling in user lists, pulling in any sort of hierarchy information about the like org structure and teams and departments, but I probably would say don't try to maintain that yourselves, because that's like its own beast, right? Like maintaining org hierarchies is tricky. What is your what's your pricing model? So it's not per user, right? Because the incentive is to get everybody in, so you want to make it essentially free to add users. So what is the plan there?
Absolutely. So we've designed just a pricing with some steps. So between 0 and 10, between 10 and 50, and 50 plus. This is something we're not fully clear about yet. We're still in test and talking with our beta testers to know how much they're willing to pay for such a tool. We have our first bill that has been sent a few weeks ago, but this is still not clear. And actually, we are looking for beta testers, and that will be part of our discussion to see what will be our pricing. But it will be something of like different steps and size of companies. Because obviously, as you mentioned, we want everyone to use it and to be free to add anyone on the platform. But I don't know, to give you an example, for this version of our product, so quite basic, still already valuable, I guess. We had one first client paying 1,000 for 25 users per month. But yeah, that's still a thing that we are currently investigating.
Yeah, because it seems like if one of the main pitches is number of users, whenever I have a user limit, I'm always going to start, especially small, like sharing users and not
absolutely.
bringing it in. And if you have the just-in-time sort of like, depending on how you provision those users, like we were doing some just-in-time provisioning at my last company, and we would add their Active Directory and add 200,000 users, but only like 50 people were really actually using our product. We just happened to all of a sudden have their entire Active Directory. So how you decide that is interesting. Have you? And I guess I wonder about doing it by number of tables, or
that's
something
really
like that.
Yeah.
Or even number of table creators or table owners or whatnot. Like data team is not an exact proxy for the size of the org, but you certainly get a lot more value out of this tool as you've got more people creating tables. And then whoever is just consuming documentation is kind of a freebie.
Well, and you could also even go the full flexible route too, as like number of views. So you can like have so many views. You can have unlimited users, but they can only view it so many times. And then you could get even tricky and do like soft and hard limits where you just shut off people's access to the documentation based on views.
No, that's very good points. And actually, yeah, that's kind of a pain, because one of like we at the beginning we were investigating into just per user because it was the most simple and like known way of paying for a SaaS.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that's not our model and that's not our incentive. So this is exactly the reflection and the thoughts we are having right now with our beta testers. And it's really interesting.
And that can be hard too, right? Because the pressure to go per user in SaaS is really powerful. Like my last company, it made more sense to do it. We had a conference room tool, and everything made more sense to do per conference room, but there was this huge push to try to get it per user because that's what everybody talks in. So it's like,
yeah, that's the most easy and the most known way of doing it. But for example, if we start to make pay per table, then you might not want to put all your tables on Castor, which is not also a good incentive, and it's not as easy. Usually, companies have no idea about how many tables they have, so it can be hard as well. So yeah, still investigating different things, but yeah,
there could be an option just to like essentially license tables. To be like, these tables we pull in all your tables, here they all are, but here's how many people can actually look at, or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking the other route, Tristan, because it looks like you're still in the stage of building some other connections and integrations. Maybe the per integration route might work, because it feels like some of them will be a bit more of a pain than others. Like, if Looker is going to be difficult to extract and do a two-way sync, you're going to spend like a lot of effort in like partnership management with Looker and all that stuff, which you can kind of build down to the clients. Of like, if you really, really want Looker, and you probably do, because people who pay for Looker want to just integrate everything because they pay so much already for it anyway. They just need all the tooling to make it better. Then you can kind of push the cost and have your R&D or like just your upkeep costs kind of pushed onto the user. It kind of sucks for us future end users because like there's more lock-in that comes in play, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me, because sort of the base functionality of just documenting in one place is something that you can see a path to doing on your own. Like, it's probably not going to be as beautiful and probably not as functional, but like once you build the integrations and sort of bidirectional flow of this metadata, that is something that most small to medium-sized companies are never going to even contemplate building. And those connections are what really add value for people. That's totally true.
Yeah, that's really good point.
And then you can have like a free tier where people who self-document are kind of free, and then you're going to see these small companies try to hack connections on their own and be like, I'm going to write some fancy Python that scrapes this data and tosses it in.
Well, that's actually what we are doing, but
right.
No, then if you can do real Jedi mind tricks with that and actually create a developer platform, then you can just take their solutions and
yeah, well, actually,
you can actually say, yeah, no, go ahead, make them, and then we're gonna take them and charge you for it when you're done maintaining it. So all of this, do you have the idea, does this run on your own SaaS cloud, or are you going to be doing it like private cloud, on-prem? Is it just like a Docker container and you're like, yeah, we can deploy this anywhere? Like, what's sort of the idea around that?
Yeah, for now it's only a SaaS, so everything is running on our cloud servers, and we want to make it, we want to Dockerize it in the next 3 months, because some companies just won't agree to share even only the metadata. But for now, it's running everything on our own. We scrap your metadata, we get it and store it in our servers. But the idea is that if we have something more on-premise, more secure, more on the customer side, we can add so many more features. We can add some statistic on the columns. We can add some querying things. We can dive a bit more into the data itself. So there might be much more interesting and valuable and powerful features that we want to develop if we go and deep dive more into the on-prem or on the client side version of the product. So I guess it will be something much more complete and powerful. But for now, the really simple, easy data documentation tool is a SaaS on our cloud.
How do you see this kind of in the integration idea? But how do you see this integrating not with data tool products, but other knowledge-based tools? So there's like Confluence, that's the Atlassian product, right? There's like Notion, Airtable, Google Docs, right? Like whatever people are using to store knowledge in general, how does this play in with those other knowledge-based tools?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And actually, usually the people we are addressing, the small startups, they are using Notion or Confluence as a documenting tool. The thing is that it's hardly discoverable and really hard to maintain, and that's what we want to address. But obviously, there are some links, and typically the business definitions of some terms might be on those tools. So that should also be some integration. The thing is that it's easy because there are maybe if you take Notion and Confluence, you have, I guess, 95% of the market. So it might not be that difficult, but that's something we need to think as well on. And again, it will be more for the business glossary, for the business definition of some terms. But when you're talking about data and table column analysis, like everything is like could be done in Castor. And I guess this is where, if you have a data question, you will go on Castor more than on Confluence.
Mm-hmm.
To that point, I think. Oh, sorry, Dylan.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
It might not have to be two-way. Maybe it's just like a quick way to import of like point me to the Google Sheet or the Notion table. And then like it imports everything, and you can, like, the name of the file might be wrong. Like it might be named customer, like active customers, and like the table is actually active_customers. But maybe you can just point it and like link. So you have the metadata from the table, you have their sheet. If you can just like link the two and say these are the same things, and it's more like a migration tool to jump into Castor and be like, yeah, all of this is outdated by 3 months, but maybe 5 fields are correct. You can keep those 5 fields, and then usually that's like the hard part. That's what I tend to see. Like there's a bunch of stale documents that starting from scratch is a pain, but being able to pull it over and pretend it's real for like 5 minutes and then realize it's all wrong gives you a jumping off point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And actually, we've been talking with some customers and some testers, and we've been charging them for doing the scrapping and putting everything into place. Like sometimes they had some Excel sheets or some Confluence page that we scrapped and put everything on Castor, and we charge for this work a bit sense. More than when, and then they're out to go and play with our tool.
All right, well, we're right at time, so I'm gonna suggest we wrap up, but I will get this recording up in the next few days. Tristan, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you very much to all of you. It was really interesting.